I've got the Cossor on the bench and I'm trying to work out why I've got no FM reception. I could just about hear a very weak garbled signal in the background. The valve that was tested on the FM front end has been replaced. I've got a new Mullard valve in there. That valve tests good, but still no reception. It was fractionally better, but it was you can't hear anything. I'll show you if I've got full volume, and if I tune through with an external area connected, you might just hear a garbled, but you won't get anything really of any sense. Now I'm pretty sure it's the FM front end, the very front end as well, because this is a 10.7 IF from my signal generator. Just to show you, you can see how sensitive that is to the IF. So the IF strip's clearly working alright. The problem is right at the very front end of the radio. So let me show you what the front end consists of. Well, a lot to it actually. Let's bring it down a bit. So we've got these inputs here to the FM aerial. I've checked all the voltages here. This is the AGC feedback that controls the grid bias. This grid bias is fine. I've actually tried to manually adjust the grid potential. That hasn't improved anything at all. If I feed signal into this first IF strip, which is here, this is the first IF of the FM, it's very strong, signal's very strong. But I'm not getting anything through this valve, it seems to me. Now, I've been trying various things, all the resistors look fine, and I'm starting to wonder now, and this is, I'll show you why I think this, I'm starting to suspect that this C4 possibly is either got a short on it or has drifted out of tolerance, and I'll show you why that is now. This L3 is the inductor just here on the top of the radio. This is here, this is the aerial tuning coil, this is the local oscillator, this is the aerial trimmer. So that L3 is that trimmer there, which is there, and L5 is that trimmer there. That's your local oscillator trimmer C9, which is that one. And what I'm finding is I'm not getting any sort of gain from the front end, because it looks like this is all off out of resonance basically. And I'll show you why I think that. If I tune into a weak signal, or try and find a weak signal, it's very hard to find one. You'll have to listen carefully because I've got the volume full up because the reset is so weak. Watch what happens if I pull this out and measure this inductor. Okay, I've got FM reception now. Bring this back into mesh. Can't pick anything up, it loses all the front end. So if I reduce the inductance on that, it works. Now, I can't see what else it can be other than this tank circuit's not in swing with the other one. So this tuner, basically the radio signals aren't being tuned in at the right frequency. The local oscillator is running at the right frequency, I assume, but this isn't matched. Now, of course, the other thing it could be is this local oscillator is grossly out of frequency, but I still can't see, because the scale calibration is reasonable. It's not it's not 10 megahertz out or so. So presently, I'm looking at or suspecting this this capacitor across this inductor. I can't see that inductor's changed at all. There's a slight chance maybe that capacitor's changed in value. It also has got this C3 here, which is a cap that goes down to chassis, and that obviously is just a decoupling capacitor, and the voltage should be supplied through this R2, and R2 is where are we? Where's R2? There's R2 down here in the left hand corner, which is this 2K2 resistor, and that's supplying voltage for the anode of this valve. Getting 85 volts here. It's supposed to be 90, so it's a little bit low, but there shouldn't be enough to affect the radio this badly. Now I could also what I could do is change that resistor for a U2K2 to bring up the voltage to the anode slightly. But first of all, I'm going to have a look at possibly taking this capacitor out, this capacitor at C4 out, and checking that for a leak. Okay, thank you everyone for the recommendations that you've given me, trying to find out what's wrong with this FM front end. I did follow the link that someone put on there to the radio forum regarding the same radio actually with the same problem, and they were suggesting that they replaced one of the capacitors on the IF. I think it was C12. Yeah, it's this C12 here, which is the front of the capacitor across the first IF transformer. Obviously their one was short. I took the capacitor out and checked it. It tests good, so it's not that. And the signal at this point is strong anyway. It seems to be around this section here. But what I am doing, which I am sort of took a pinch of salt that the valve that I was supplied was okay, which is a bit stupid really. I don't know that. So we're going to check the ECC85 just to make sure it actually has got some sort of emission. So it's just going to through this and run it on through the same core. So it's a 6 D5B4 D5B socket 4. Start off with shorts test. Let's wait for the valve to warm up. Shorts indicator is not lit. Checking for grid emission. Very slight grid emission, not a lot emission. Very strong, off the scale, 100%. So that's the first stage of the valve. And it's the first stage that's the one that looks like it's suspicious. So let's go to the second stage in a minute. So it's D5, it's E4, so just turn this to E. And that's good as well. Grid leakage is low, shorts is good. So that valve's testing very strong, and it certainly looks like a brand new valve. It's you can see there there's no discoloration in the on the inside. Get it to focus, there we go, and the getter's nice and bright. So I think we'll pop the valve back in and we'll have to move on from there. Okay, just proving that the local oscillator is running. If we get a scope probe on ×1 and short the output out and use the loop as a antenna, if you hold that close to the local oscillator, you'll see on the scope the frequency. See this frequency response on the scope? Come around so you can see a bit better. So you can see that frequency there. Now that's running at, let's have a look at the frequency, about 81 megahertz. So we're running on the on the dial at 89. So 81 plus 89. So it looks like the local oscillator is slightly out of tune with the IF to get the right frequency. But it shows the local oscillator is actually running. So it's not a local oscillator fault. All you can hear, I don't know if you can hear this on the radio, but it's just a sort of like a buzzing in the background. Tuning makes not a lot of difference. If I decouple the aerial and tune, just about pick up a radio station there, but it's very weak. And it seems the more I decouple the air tuner, the better performance I get. So it still suggests to me there's a major alignment problem with possibly a shorted turn on an inductor, or possibly a leaky capacitor. Now I've checked a number of the capacitors so far, and that includes this capacitor here, which is in parallel with the aerial tuner, and that's fine. And I've checked these two here, they're good, and I've checked this one here. This is I think this is C7, the one that someone recommended on one of the radio forums that have been short, but that's on the IF amplifier, the IF amplifier is working very strong. There's no problem with that. It still seems to be in this area here. There's a problem, and you'd think it was simple, wouldn't you? You'd think it would be straightforward to fix, but the resistors are good, and so far all the capacitors I've checked are good. It really leaves just the inductors, and it may end up with being a replacement module, which I don't really want to do, because that means I've got to buy another radio with one of these modules. So what I'm going to do next, I'm going to check this little capacitor here, and that capacitor is, let's have a look in the circuit. There's this capacitor that runs across here down to chassis, and it looks like it's possibly C6. Let's have a look in the circuit, see what C6 does. C6 is, where are we? Can't even see C6. But you've seen it already, haven't you? C6. There it is. See, that's a possibility, I suppose, because this is I think they call the reaction coil. I think this is or neutralizing coil. Do they call it the neutralizing coil? L7 reaction coil. Okay, so I suppose there's a possibility that C6 is short. There's got no reaction there. I don't exactly understand what that's doing, but let's check them all. You know, because we're clutching at straws here. I don't really know what I'm looking for. So I'm going to turn the radio off. Let's get that capacitor out and have a look, see if that does anything. I'll just be looking at this reaction capacitor here that I was going to change, and I've just spotted this. You see, this looks like it's a burn. These wires are shorted, and this is one of the coils. So I'm going to unshort that. It looks like it's flashed over at some point. I mean, it's nothing I've done, but it certainly looks like it's burnt there. So let's get that sorted out and see if that makes any difference. Okay, next day. Right, I've gone through it. There's nothing wrong with the IF amplifier. Ascertained that it's very sensitive. Seems to be finally found that it's not even the RF front end. I think what it is the local oscillator's output is so weak. It's not generating enough output, basically. So what I'm looking at now is measuring these two capacitors here. Now these two capacitors here, I'll just show you on the circuit where we are, on the right circuit. These two capacitors just here, so C7 and C8. And what they are, they're part of the local oscillator, sort of like tank circuit to make it oscillate. Now C7 and C8, according to the service manual, C7 and C8, where are we? I'm going to line the cameras up properly. Here we go, C7 and C8. FM oscillator trimmers. 22 picofarad they're supposed to be measuring. And you can see that there are 22, red, red, black. According to the HP, they're 47. And they both measure the same. Now, I suppose they could have drifted, and Andy, you spotted that and said that sometimes these capacitors fail. I've checked all the wax capacitors, they're fine. This is the capacitor that goes across the RF tuning slug, that's fine. Basically checked all the capacitors except the one that you told me to check, because I like to be different. Thinking, well, it can't be that because the oscillator's running. But when I was probing around with the scope, if I put my scope probe on the grid of the valve, it just swamps the thing. It just can't do anything. That's with the times 10 probe as well, so you've got a high source impedance. It just stalls the whole thing. And if I'm poking around looking at other parts around the local oscillator, it has quite a strange effect. If you're poking around looking, say, at the anode of this valve here, where are we? Where is it? Right, okay, so it's this anode of this valve here, the first valve, the ETC85. Sometimes the volume gets louder and louder and louder. It's almost like the thing starts to sort of swing into oscillation properly. So what I'm going to do is try and find a couple of 22 puff capacitors, pop those in, and we'll see if we get any improvement